Batman the Animated Series Volume 2. I'm going to start this off ahead of time by apologizing for the wait you guys probably have between when I announce I'm going to make this video to when it actually comes out, because I know it's going to take me a while to script and record and edit, even if I can't edit it in the way I want to because of copyright reasons. Don't be surprised if there's just gameplay in the background to make this process a little quicker and get the video out there to you guys and start on Volume 3. Also, I need to finish Season 2 of The Batman. I have not forgotten about that. There's a lot of projects I need to work on. I just have very little time between work and sleep and the little bit of a social life I do have. So, apologies, but if you're hearing this, the video is finally up. I already have a video ranking all the Volume 1 episodes of Batman the Animated Series that I made like 2 years ago, and my ranking probably hasn't really changed. Batman the Animated Series is a show I've seen so much that usually whatever I rank is kind of set in stone because I've seen the episodes so much. I got a pretty good idea of where to place them. And there are videos me and my friend Connor made over all the Volume 2 episodes of Batman the Animated Series. It was his first time watching the episodes, so it's more of a conversation between the two of us about the episodes. But if there is an episode you want discussed in further detail than I do in this video, go check whatever episode of the DCAU rewatch that is. Now, let's get into the Volume 2 episode rankings.
Won't you come with us? There's nothing for you here.
There's nothing for me anywhere.
What a weird and terrible episode Tiger was, with an ending making you believe for a brief second that maybe it wasn't that bad. If all you saw was the last 30 seconds of this episode, then you would think it was great. Outside of this, there's not much that's redeeming. Catwoman is turned into an actual cat. Her and Tiger share a very odd connection throughout the episode. Batman and Catwoman's connection is always good. It's just weird seeing her as an actual humanoid cat.
Are you getting soft on criminals? Or just on me?
I think the fever is making you delusional.
Ever the escape artist, I see.
Next is another Catwoman episode. Roland Daggett is taking stray cats off the streets to experiment on. He's developing a new drug to sell. But of course, Selina is having none of this, so she intervenes, gets drugged, and there's a load of innuendos between her and Batman throughout the episode. This isn't terrible like the last one, but definitely what I'd consider to be one of the weaker episodes in the show.
And then he saved my life again.
I need a new car.
The Mechanic only ranks above the last because it's kind of cool getting Batstory on this version of the Batmobile. Also, the Batman Return references are great. The rubber duck made an appearance, and I do love that. Penguin is actually pretty sinister in this episode. Sadly, he has some of the weakest episodes in this show, though. Earl, the guy that built the Batmobile, and his daughter were fine. They didn't really add anything to the episode for me, outside of the Batmobile backstory, obviously. And Robin is in this episode, which just kind of helps. You need some Robin every now and then just to lighten your day, you know?
Kirk.
The nightmare's finally over.
Terror in the Sky was the sequel to the pilot episode of the show On Leather Wings. Not nearly as good in my opinion. It's an average episode overall. A weaker episode for this show, twisting the Man-Bat story a bit and having it be She-Bat, Kirk Langstrom's wife, instead, was an interesting choice. I love the detective work done by Batman this episode. There are a few beautiful shots, especially in the snow during the She-Bat and Batman chase, but this episode is far from anything special.
I said no shooting! Let him handle this, for now.
The standout thing for Moon of the Wolf was the dialogue. It was surprisingly good in this episode. I properly enjoy aspects of it, but the main villain isn't a super strong character. They just needed someone with a motive to become stronger and faster, someone to turn into not a Captain America, but a werewolf. And it's still freaking cool seeing Batman take on a werewolf. I mean, come on.
Stay down! Guess not.
The name is Riddler. Edward Nickman no longer exists. You might recall that he was once fired by an ungrateful employer.
What is Reality is without a doubt the weakest of the Riddler episodes in Batman the Animated Series. It has the weakest riddles. There are very few riddles, actually. There are some puzzles, but the entire premise is that Nigma has Gordon trapped inside a virtual reality, so Batman must go in and save him. And once he's in, Riddler cuts off the way in so Robin can't follow, but he's still helping Batman from the outside for a while, but the episode ends with Riddler and Batman just making clones of themselves. I think in theory this episode would have been better a few years later once virtual reality had become a bigger thing.
But while you have your gallery of rogues, I have my grove.
Number 20 is Eternal Youth, and something interesting about this volume is it begins and ends with Poison Ivy. This isn't a very strong episode, but it's a memorable one for me. Bruce Wayne is invited to a retreat, but Alfred and his girlfriend Maggie go in his place. Shout out to Alfred for getting some action, but Poison Ivy is the one who sent the invite to this retreat, which Bruce soon discovers, and it seems he's too late. Because Poison Ivy has basically turned everyone that has done plants wrong into trees already. But of course, in these shows, there's always an antidote. All of Gotham would be dead if not. Like, literally, all of Batman's villains, you need an antidote for besides, like, Two-Face, because you just throw a bunch of coins at him and he goes flying off the side of a cliff. The final showdown between Batman and Ivy was good. I think the second half of this episode is pretty strong. There's just not really anything special that happened.
No. Something only you can give me. Tell me about my father.
Paging the Crime Doctor. The ending to this episode is great, and it was a terrific way to wrap this 20-minute story up. I also appreciate getting more Leslie Tompkins. Thomas Wayne is really the center point and the connective tissue for this entire episode. Rupert Thorne needs a doctor, and it turns out his brother, Matt, is a doctor. He's the crime doctor. And he happens to have gone to school for his degree the same time Thomas did. And we already know Leslie was close with Bruce's parents and Bruce himself. She knows Matt from the past as well. It's a very intertwined story. There's just not much outside of Bruce and Thomas I really care about.
Leaving so soon, Kyodai?
Day of the Samurai is an episode that doesn't do a lot for me, but it's cool getting some of Bruce's backstory from his time overseas. We got a lot more of that in this volume. This was a sequel episode to Night of the Ninja, which, as you'll see, I think is a superior episode in every way. I think this does dive deeper into martial arts, legends, and such than the first though. The main premise is a death touch that Kyoto Kai-Ken. What the fuck did I just say? Kyodai-Ken. My apologies. The villain of this episode and the villain of Night of the Ninja is trying to find the correct method for. The correct technique is buried away. I don't get why they never burn these things if they don't want anyone reaching them. I should mention Ken trained in Japan with Bruce in the past, and he was better than Bruce, which I like that you get to see Batman isn't always the best at everything. This more so goes with Night of the Ninja than Day of the Samurai, honestly, Kyodai-Ken being better than Bruce, but still. The point is, Batman isn't necessarily the best at everything, he just has more will than most, which is why he overcomes. The moments with Bruce and his sensei throughout are the strong points for me. The final showdown between he and Ken is good. The setting is a volcano, which is a bit extreme. Ken hits the death touch on Bruce, but he has that part of his body covered, of course, by like a piece of wood. So he lets Kyodai believe he's dead before rising up and defeating him. And the shot when he does rise up is kind of badass. But then Ken ominously sinks into the lava below after an explosion is triggered, leaving us to believe he's dead, which I'm pretty sure he definitely is.
Barbara, what are you doing here?
Rescuing you, silly. Come on.
At 17 is Heart of Steel. The whole robots taking over thing I'm not a huge fan of, although Robot Bullock versus Batman was terrific. The main reason this episode ranks above the last few is because it's the introduction of Barbara Gordon into the show. Obviously a huge character, and she's the focus here. The entire second part is basically her teaming with Batman, trying to figure out where her real father is. She's the one that brings it to Batman's attention that Gordon hasn't been himself lately. Robot Jim is freaky as hell too. Bob Hastings speaking in the most monotone and emotionless voice he can. The love interest for Bruce is just to make all this better tie together. She's a robot because why wouldn't she be? Once she's to Wayne Manor, she is eventually left alone with Alfred and lays him out before discovering the Batcave. Poor Alfred, man. But the main villain is a giant computer system called Hardak, and the final fight is basically Batman and Barbara versus robot versions of political and police figures in Gotham, like Gordon and Mayor Hill. The actual people are being stored in a giant preservation tank, because of course they are. It's just a lot of sci-fi stereotypes this episode is, and I can't say I vibe with it, but I think they did well with what the concept was.
As you said, Detective, this is not over.
Off Balance is an episode. I think it's good, but I don't have a lot to say about it. It was a great setup episode for the League of Shadows and Ra's al Ghul. Batman and Talia were great. Vertigo isn't the best villain. I'm not a huge fan of the trippy spinning segments. But for the ending alone and the Talia Batman stuff throughout, it deserves some recognition. Like, of course, Talia was going to figure out Batman's identity. That's just bound to happen because Talia and Bruce are in love. Once we get to the Demon's Quest next volume, I'll have more to say, I promise.
Yes. Revenge!
Interestingly enough, The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne was the first multi-villain episode of the show. It opens with Judge Vargas terrified out of her mind because of what's on a certain tape from a recent retreat she took. Yes, this is basically just a better version of Eternal Youth. But anyway, her burning down the old courthouse, I believe it was, is what was on the tape. It was her burning down something. I'm pretty sure it was the courthouse. So Bruce, as he does, decides to go on this same retreat. And spearheading this retreat is Dr. Hugo Strange. It almost starts off as a therapy session, deep diving into Bruce's past and his trauma, showing on screen for only Hugo to see is what Bruce is seeing in his mind. And that is, of course, Batman. It's vengeance in the form of Batman. Now with this valuable piece of information, what Hugo decides to do is sell it, which is very smart, let's be honest. I don't know about selling to the three biggest villains in Gotham, but anyway, we see Hugo make his first call to the Joker, then it cuts to the Joker, Penguin, and Two-Face all getting off the same plane, and in this scene, there are several great character moments between these three, especially Two-Face and the Joker.
Get out of my face, clown!
Which one?
But in the end, Hugo is made a fool of, millions sitting in front of him, but what's on the tape he plays is not what he saw. It's another tape that Bruce conjured up in his mind of Strange planning to make Joker, Penguin, and Harvey each look like fools themselves. Which of course Batman thought of that. He is a pure genius. So the three villains take Strange for a plane ride. Batman thwarts all their plans, saves Hugo Strange, even though he's a piece of shit. Gordon and GCPD show up to arrest them all. Then we get a great ending of Bruce showing up while Batman is still present. Hugo looks like even more of a fool. He's in shock. Once everyone but Batman, Bruce, and Alfred are gone, it's revealed Bruce is Dick. I mean, if it's not Alfred, who else could it be, right? This episode has plenty of highs. I just think the setup takes a bit too long. The episode takes a little too long to get off its feet and get up and running.
How dare that smug, preening fool try to cash in on my image!
Joker's wild. This is a great episode. Don't let the placement fool you. There are just better Joker episodes in the show. I think the Joker and Ivy moments in Arkham are iconic at this point. I've seen the scene Joker throws the plant at the TV everywhere. The delivery from Hamill is great. How dare that smug, preening fool try to cash in on my image! And that's our setup for this episode. Cameron Kaiser opens a casino based entirely around the Clown Prince of Crime, and it pisses Joker off to no end. He breaks out of Arkham, and I love this escape too, All of the Joker escapes we see in the show are pretty ridiculous, with him escaping with a flying tree in Christmas with the Joker, to stopping some guards with nothing but soapy water in this episode. And to start his escape this episode, he literally just pretended like he was sick, and the guards believed him, even though he's the Joker. Dumb guards aside, there is a standout episode that I adore in this episode, and it's the scene between Joker and Bruce, of course. This interaction is so memorable. I love Joker introducing himself as some nameless clown. He is referenced as Jack Napier a couple times in the show, which makes sense given Batman 89 is the reason the show got made to begin with. Hell, you see his name while Batman is going through his files later in this episode. But back to the casino scene. When Bruce gets under Joker's skin and messes up his shuffle, it's great. One of the best scenes in the show, honestly. This moment was 90 seconds of perfection.
Okay.
Hit me.
The climax of this episode is entertaining enough. Joker's running wild in the casino. He and Batman throw some hands. Joker leaves Batman tied to a roulette and throws a grenade onto it, which is a random memorable moment I myself have in my mind. Then Joker takes Mr. Kaiser for a ride in a helicopter, which Joker in any kind of flying automobile is always fantastic. Batman shows back up, saves Kaiser, and defeats Joker. Joker is sent back to Arkham, and everything comes full circle. Joker's back in Arkham with Ivy watching television, and there are other inmates around this time as well. I love how they do that in so many of these episodes. It always makes the world feel that much bigger and fleshed out.
What happened that made you put this on?
A painful memory. And a promise.
Now we're to the halfway point of this list. At number 13 is Zatanna. I love her as a character. The villain of the episode is pretty weak, but it's not really about that. Even though most of this episode is set in the present, Bruce's and Zatanna's past is a centerpiece of the episode. I love the one flashback scene we do get in the beginning of Bruce training with Zatara, learning to become an escape artist. And I'm a sucker for the Joker reference. I think the action scenes are good and the incorporation of illusions is done extremely well. Also, the end with Batman telling Zatanna he has to keep the promise he made, he has to be Batman, and her responding with her dad would be proud of him is so goddamn emotional.
2 of hearts.
Joker.
Oh, it's a dumb trick anyway.
Curtains going down.
Hagen!
Speaking of emotional, maybe the most tragic villain outside of Mr. Freeze and Two-Face in the show is Clayface. Much like the prior mentioned ones, he's usually written really well. This isn't as good as Feet of Clay, but being better than that 2-part episode is far from an easy feat. I think this was a perfect follow-up. Hagen is committing crimes and stealing equipment because he just wants to be better. He wants to be normal again, and he'll do anything to get that back. He's been staying with a scientist by the name of Stella, and they've been preparing him for a surgery to revert some of these changes to make Hagen back into more of a human, quote-unquote. Cause, I mean, even though he can shapeshift, he is still human, right? There is this weird romance going on between Stella and Clayface too, which I kinda do appreciate. Once Batman discovers where Matt has been staying, he goes to Stella's, and the talk between them about Hagen is rather intense. The ending is tragic. The rain really adds to it all. Much of this episode was like a horror flick, which meshes very well into the world of Batman. The lightning strike in the background behind Clayface as he's shaping his body is a memorable shot. Also, Clayface literally puts Batman inside of him, and that visual is kind of haunting. I love how many of these episodes end with a character's apparent death, only for them to return in a later episode. It really does make this show feel even more comic book-like.
So, the famous Batman. I am honored.
Now we return to Bruce's time in Japan with his old-time rival, Kyodai Ken, in Night of the Ninja. This was the precursor to Day of the Samurai, and like I said earlier, I think this episode is better in every way. For starters, it's set in Gotham, which I just like my Batman stuff set in Gotham. Second, it has Robin. Dick Grayson really elevates this episode. His and Alfred's conversations showing their concern for Bruce is great. The beginning of the episode with Gordon and Batman at the crime scene, all that was left behind was a shuriken. The strong points of this episode are the characters. I like the slight mystery element and diving deep into Bruce's past. Kyodai Ken being one of the people he could never beat. The end with Summer Gleason and Bruce Wayne kidnapped is incredible too. Bruce allows Ken to beat the absolute shit out of him, all to protect his identity. Robin shows up to cover Summer's eyes with a carpet or something of that nature. Point is, she can't see, so Bruce becomes Batman and defeats Kyodai. Summer is oblivious, and all is fine. This is a great episode.
Thanks for your help. It would have been harder to defeat him with Summer watching. Maybe even impossible.
Man or woman, a sick mind is capable of anything.
A very enlightened statement, Batman.
Oh, Paul Dini, we love you. From creating the character of Harley Quinn to pairing her with Poison Ivy, this is a real girl power episode, of course. Harley and Ivy both meet while performing crimes at the same place. A total coincidence, but this type of thing is bound to happen in a town like Gotham, I guess, so not too far outside the realm of possibility. The two unite and go on a complete tear where they blow up some, what I'd assume are high schoolers' car, to busting a men's only meeting. They even begin living together, but Harley's journey this episode begin with a falling out between she and the Joker. This has probably one of my favorite openings of the show. It's a chase scene between Batman, the Joker, and Harley. Harley is driving Joker, and in his mind, she is doing nothing right. He is angry, he gets a little abusive, as we typically always see with their relationship, and he eventually kicks her out, expecting her just to come back as she usually does. But this time, she finds Poison Ivy, and it formed one of my favorite friendships in all of comics. I must say, I love how the hyenas Joker and Harley have are so much less lively without Harley. Joker eventually finds out where Harley and Ivy are hiding out. I should mention, Batman has been on Harley and Ivy's trail most of the episode, but he's been in very little of it. The finale is Joker trying to get Harley back from Ivy. The moment he squirts the flower in her face and she responds by laughing in his face, saying it doesn't work on her is incredible. Batman shows up to minimize the damage. The episode does ultimately come down to Batman versus the Joker in the end. But they were the supporting characters in this episode. Harley and Ivy have the spotlight. It ends with Joker blowing up the toxic waste dump Ivy and Harley was staying at, and Batman saving him. I always love these moments that showcase Joker's pure insanity. It ends with Joker, Harley, and Ivy all back in Arkham. Harley is falling back in love with the Joker, and Ivy throws dirt in her face cause she knows he's no good for her. This episode did a lot of things. It was the beginning of the Ivy and Harley relationship. It further expands on Joker's and Harley's relationship, and it made Joker work as more of a supporting character. Batman wasn't even in much of it, but it's a great Batman episode.
So here is a thing to keep you warm?
Some people are gonna think this episode is too high, and I'm not sorry. I really love it. There's a detective element, a certain mystique, and we get a lot of Batman working with Gordon. The villain of this episode, Wormwood, is basically just a Riddler ripoff, setting up traps for his victims, and he's tasked to get the cape and cowl of the Batman. The traps are good. The first was a lady held hostage on some train tracks. The train, of course, coming. Batman jumps to save her, only to discover she was a hologram, and Wormwood escapes. The second was inside a wax museum where Wormwood manages to actually trap Batman. He gets him into a room with a 20k watt lamp, which Batman breaks, but breaking the lamp releases a toxic nerve gas, so Batman does actually hand over his cape and cowl. He is, however, wearing another mask underneath, much to Wormwood's disappointment, but since his job was to only retrieve the cape and cowl, not to discover Batman's identity, he takes them and is on his way. Then a moment that still sticks in my mind from my childhood happens. It's a moment I have a lot of fondness for. Wormwood returns to Josek, the man who tasked him to do this job. He hands him the cape and cowl and asks Josek what will he do with it, only for Josek to respond, he will wear them. Batman set a trap up himself for Wormwood. He dons the cape and cowl. A fight breaks out. Of course, he beats Wormwood, but once he's imprisoned, Wormwood receives a gift, and it's the cape and cowl with a note saying it's something to keep him warm. There's just a lot of standout Batman moments in this episode for me. It's one that's close to my heart, and all that was enough to get it into the top 10.
Shut up! All I wanted from you, dearie, was a little friendship. That would have cost you nothing. But
now on to one of the more depressing episodes of Batman the Animated Series, probably the best Penguin episode 2, and Birds of a Feather is also the first of many redemption episodes in the show. Penguin has been exonerated of his crimes and is trying to walk the straight and narrow now, which no one, including Batman, believes. Batman is on Penguin's trail the entire episode because he just can't accept that maybe Penguin has changed, but things seem to look on the up and up for him until Veronica Breland comes into his life. Penguin is falling in love with her. He even stands up for her when a gang confronts the two of them. This was the scene where you also began to see Batman changing his perspective on Cobblepot a bit. Knowing he's done nothing wrong ever since being released from Blackgate, but Ronnie and one of her rich smug friends I don't remember the name of are playing Penguin the entire time, and even though Veronica is starting to develop something real for him, their relationship started as a joke to her. Eventually Penguin figures this out and he is back to his old ways. I liked the theater setting of the final confrontation between Batman and Penguin. It's honestly heartbreaking to see a guy who was working so hard for redemption to fall back into his ways of crime, but we all understood why he was pushed over that edge again. There were a lot of emotional beats. This is the best this version of Penguin has been so far.
Came with his own grin. See the resemblance?
What a wacky and insane plot, perfectly fitting of the Clown Prince of Crime. The Joker is poisoning fish and attempting to copyright them. It's against the law to copyright natural resources though, so Joker has to take some victims. The first is Francis, who's exposed to half of the Joker toxin in their initial meeting. Then Batman is unable to save him from the second half, that is sent into his home with a giant swordfish that Joker has attached to his van, because of course Joker has a giant swordfish that shoots off the top of his van. The second victim Batman is disguised as, but Joker poisons the man's cat, and the cat proceeds to bite his owner even while he's dressed as Batman. I really like these touches, and the fact Batman is doing a lot of detective work, camped out with Bullock and Gordon in this episode. The final scene though is, of course, the aquarium scene, where Bullock is used as bait for a giant shark and Batman proceeds to fight this giant fucking shark. Riding it and all, Joker laughing hysterically through it all, getting disturbed looks even from his henchmen and Harley. The big Batman vs. Joker confrontation is pretty good, with some great shots. Joker has one-liners as he always does, then he falls to his apparent death into the water below where the shark from earlier has fallen into also. But the episode ends on a great line of Batman wishing that Joker was in fact dead, but he doubts it, and floating atop the water is, of course, a Joker card. Yeah, I love this episode. It's such a comic book plot that works so well.
How much is a good night's sleep worth? Now there's a riddle for you.
Now we are right back to the detective work with Batman. This was the perfect introduction episode for the Riddler, and it's not even my favorite Riddler episode in the entire show, but it opens with Nigma being fired by his boss, Mockridge. Love the names this episode, by the way. But Mockridge would later go on to become extremely wealthy off of Edward's invention. This is what leads to Edward Nigma becoming the Riddler. He is out for revenge, and it's warranted. I think all the riddles in this episode are great, the solutions actually make sense, and Riddler's aforementioned creation that Mockridge is profiting on is a game, Maze of the Minotaur, which we see Robin playing early on this episode in the Batcave. I really love Bruce's and Dick's dynamic in this show. It's great this episode. The Maze of the Minotaur is the setting of the final showdown this episode, so Robin having played the game is a huge win here. And I love the traps, the song keys especially, each note triggering the equivalent amount of blades in the maze as the note has sharps. That's a brilliant Riddler trap. And Robin was the one that figured this one out before Batman, which I do love. Batman gets to the center of the maze through a loophole with the Hand of Fate, which I also love. Batman uses shortcuts when he has to, and why wouldn't he? The Hand of Fate is a giant flying hand. Batman tampers with the wiring, picks up Robin, and gets to the center of the maze where he must answer one final riddle. He defeats Riddler, saves Mockridge, but in the end, Riddler does get away, and it ends on a shot of Mockridge living in fear of his life, knowing Nigma is still out there. It's a perfect ending, and it's what the guy deserves. When you really think about it, it kinda seems he's a bigger villain than Riddler here, which I appreciate. I also appreciate the fact that Riddler got away.
He's a friend. More than a friend. Jim Gordon's the same age my father would have been if he hadn't.
And kickstarting the top 5 is an episode with no big villain. The villain is actually kinda lame, just some thug named Jazzman, but every other thing about this episode is pretty much perfect. The Batman-Gordon relationship is obviously one of the best things in the Batman mythos. Gordon gets shot in I Am the Night, and it's basically about Batman struggling with being the Knight. He is legitimately debating hanging up the cape and cowl. Bruce talks to all the people he's closest to this episode. Alfred, Dick, Leslie Tompkins. The reason he's late to begin with and blames himself for Gordon's current state, that being hospitalized and unconscious, is because it was the anniversary of his parents' death and he was paying his respects in Crime Alley, which leads me to believe this is exactly 1 year after the Volume 1 episode Appointment in Crime Alley, which is just a shade of the continuity within the show, but it's cool that this show has an actual timeline. Even if it is still basically episodic, the B-plot with the kid was good as well. It complemented Batman's struggle in this episode well. Batman is a symbol, and people in Gotham do look up to him. They tackled a lot in these 20 minutes. It was emotional, it was heartfelt, it was real.
You can't hurt a dream, my good fellow. And you can't wake up.
Then I'll see you in your nightmares.
The next 4 are all difficult to rank. They are all the best of the best if you ask me. Perchance to Dream is what Bruce's ideal life would be. His parents are alive. He's in a relationship with Selina. He knows none of this is real though. He knows it's too good to be true. His parents, Alfred and Selina, comfort him though. He wants to believe that this is his reality. What makes him certain that all this is just an illusion is the fact that he can't read. Apparently you can't read in dreams, which I'm not sure how accurate that is. In this universe, you can't though, so it works. Another thing is Batman still exists in this fantasy world. It's obviously not Bruce though, so once Bruce comes to terms with the fact he'll have to give all this up and figures out who is behind it all, he goes to confront Batman atop a bell tower. He knows Batman is the key. Bruce's parents, Alfred, Selina, everyone close to him are worried. GCPD is trying to get Mr. Wayne to come down. Batman is as well. Then it's revealed the one behind all this is the Mad Hatter. Jervis tries his best to keep Batman in this fabricated world, but Bruce jumps off of the tower, thus kicking him out of the dream. And easily defeats Mad Hatter once he awakens. I adore this episode because it is so incredibly human. Bruce would rather live with the pain of his reality than live a lie. I like that you don't know the villain of the episode until the end. Mad Hatter was probably the best choice for this type of episode. It's always an incredible watch.
Out. Please, Master Dick, you must do as he says.
Not this time, Alfred. Maybe not ever again.
Perhaps the best two-parter of the show, and even that's up for debate. This was the first episode to really give Robin center stage. It dives deep into his backstory. There are a lot of flashbacks showcasing Batman's and Robin's relationship forming. They show the Grayson's death in probably the most visual way they could for a kid's show. It's simply the rope snapping and you see them falling in shadow. They were murdered by Tony Zuko. Dick wants revenge, as one naturally would. Bruce takes him in, but Dick is still sneaking out and such. Bruce is away a lot doing Batman things, unbeknownst to Dick. We even see young Dick Grayson have dinner with a lady of the night. Really, what an episode. But since Dick is just a kid trying to hunt down Zuko on his own, Bruce has to intervene. He reveals he's Batman and trains him to be the first Robin, as we all know. Zuko got away the first time around, but now in present day, probably close to a decade later, the show takes place during Dick's college years. Zuko is back in Gotham under a different alias. Batman knows it's him, but he's kept all the information he has on Tony Zuko from Robin because he doesn't want him involved. He's afraid of what Dick may do, but Robin wants Zuko and he wants him bad. He ultimately tracks him down and comes in like a freaking badass, grabbing Zuko while driving by on his motorcycle. This is after Batman's already beat him to Zuko's hideout, but Bruce is injured, he's got a hurt leg and is limping, Robin has Zuko where he wants him, Batman comes to talk Dick out of whatever he has on his mind, they have a heartfelt talk, and it's the end of the episode. Really 2 episodes that showcase what Robin is and why both Batman and Robin are important to one another.
Caused you so much pain. I couldn't stand the thought that he might take you, too.
And slap him in that box there, and roll it into that vat of acid there.
As you can tell, I absolutely love this episode. Supposedly, the man who killed Batman was just some punk with a gun, and I love how in these types of stories, it usually isn't one of Batman's big villains that kills him or allegedly kills him. Sid the Squid was just a guy going through some desperate times. Now he's the most famous guy in all of Gotham. Also, it's explained later on how Batman escapes, but the last Batman was seen was on a rooftop with Sid where he slipped and fell just above a gas tank that was happening to explode. So Sid is sent to prison, Blackgate I presume, and Miss Harleen Quinzel shows up to post his bail. This is where we get the ever memorable subpoena line.
Don't I know you from someplace?
I think I served you a subpoena once. It was a small subpoena.
And we are just now getting to the best thing about this episode, which would be the Joker. Seeing him try to function without Batman is incredible. He has so little care for the crime game now, and we get yet another memorable line, this one from the Joker, without Batman, crime has no punchline. It's incredible, it's perfect, and I think this may be the episode that showcases Batman and Joker's relationship the best, at least from Joker's perspective. And Batman never even faces the Joker in this episode. Not directly. That's very impressive and not easy to do. But the J-Man decides to host a funeral for Batman, the Cape and Cowl are there in the coffin, and of course Joker has to give a speech, and it's great. In his own way, he's genuinely giving reasons he's going to miss Batman. But immediately after, he is prepared to kill Sid immediately. He slaps him in a box, rolls him into a vat of acid, and Sid is dead. He did what he said he was going to do. Exactly how he said he was going to do it, he did it to Sid. But not really, he's not really dead. He washes onto the shore and is in shock he's still alive. Then we go back to where the episode opens with Sid sitting in Rupert Thorne's office. And after hearing all this, Thorne isn't buying any of it. But Batman shows up before he can harm Sid in any way, then explains everything that happened. He lived because he simply swung away just before the explosion, and he somehow shifted the coffin Sid was in so that he would wash the shore and not melt in a vat of acid. He was Sid's guardian angel, his watchful protector. He had the opportunity for people to believe he was gone, and he took it. Such a damn good episode.
You're not getting out of this one.
Maybe.
And at number 1 is the obvious choice. Almost got him. It's an episode that deserves all the praise it gets. The Joker, Two-Face, Penguin, Poison Ivy, and Killer Croc are all sitting at a table playing cards. The conversation quickly turns to Batman, and each tells their almost got him story. Poison Ivy goes first, and it's a Halloween setting filled with exploding pumpkin bombs. So this can be considered a Halloween episode on some level. Two-Face goes second. Of course he goes second. And we get the origin of the giant penny. The interactions between the rogues, between stories is excellent too. Especially the ones between Ivy and Harvey, given the events of Pretty Poison.
And what does the other half want?
To hit you with a truck.
We used to date.
The show always staying with continuity. The characters play so well off of each other. The third story is technically Killer Croc's. Then the fourth story is the Penguins, and he had Batman and what he calls his aviary of doom. This version of the Penguin has a certain charm with his theatrics at times. Batman fights a giant bird and defeats it with a smaller bird because the smaller bird had a poison beak. Yes, I just said that sentence. But back to Killer Croc's story for a moment. It's a funny moment, but it makes much more sense later on in the episode when we discover Killer Croc is actually Batman.
He was getting closer. Closer!
And?
I threw a rock at him!
But before we get into further detail on that, let's talk about the final story and most recent timeline-wise of the episode, The Jokers. And he starts it by saying there's more than one way to get someone, which is perfect for what his character is, who his character is. Just a night ago, Joker had gotten the upper hand on Batman and had him constrained to an electric chair. Yes, a fucking electric chair. But this wasn't just any electric chair, it is one that's powered by laughter. Joker has Batman in front of a studio audience that's being held hostage. He gasses them, which is somewhat reminiscent of The Dark Knight Returns. It is quite funny when Harley begins reading the phone book and they are still laughing. Catwoman shows up to rescue Batman. Harley, however, knocks her out and Joker reveals that she is about to be turned into cat food and he'll send a case to Batman first thing tomorrow morning. Always with the dark turns when it comes to the Joker, you gotta love it. When he's saying this, just how big all the other villains' eyes are is great. This episode, along with The Man Who Killed Batman, are perfect indicators to why Joker is Batman's greatest foe. Croc reveals himself to be Batman. The shadow and lighting and the poker setting was perfect because all the background characters throughout are revealed to be members of GCPD. All 4 villains at the table are taken back to Arkham and Batman is off to save Catwoman from Harley. He does so and the episode ends in the most perfect way of Batman and Catwoman atop a rooftop discussing the possibility of a potential future together. You hear police sirens, Batman leaves, and the final line is Selina saying, "Almost got him." It's crazy that this episode features 7 of Batman's rogues, really only 6 since Croc was Batman, but Joker, Two-Face, Penguin, Ivy, Harley, and Catwoman all get their moments to shine. It's extremely well balanced, there's no dull moment, the characters are at their strongest. It's Batman the Animated Series at its best.
Almost got him.
I can't believe we made it, guys. I just ranked all the Volume 2 episodes of Batman the Animated Series. There's only 2 more volumes to go. Go check my Volume 1 episode out if you made it this far into this video and haven't seen that somehow. If you did make it this far into this video, I really appreciate you. You are a wonderful human being, and you deserve the best out of life. I'm rooting for you. Let me know what you think about Volume 2 of Batman the Animated Series down in the comments below. I think this could be my favorite volume. I'm not sure. I'm having a fun time rewatching, even though I've already seen the show like 10 times. It's just always a very good watch because the show gets Batman so right. There's not many bad episodes. The character interactions are great. The writing is always great. The animation is usually great. It's what's considered as the best Batman show by many for a reason, and the best versions of these characters for a reason. And it's because everyone that worked on this show understood Batman. They knew what they needed to do with this show, and they did it with flying colors. I can say what you've heard a million people say at this point, that Batman the Animated Series is amazing, and it is. So instead of that, I'm just going to end the video here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Show your support so I can get the Volume 3 video going. I need some motivation to record another 40-minute video because I want to do these episodes justice, and I hope I did that here today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.